Blessings to one and all, and welcome to this episode of Journey into Spiritualism. This week on the show, we are going to be talking about food shortages, rising gas prices, and rumors of war. Several people over the last week have emailed me and asked me what I thought about what's going on in the world right now, and if I thought that maybe perhaps this was the beginning of the end of times, the book of Revelation opening up before our very eyes. Some people were asking me what the spiritualist take on all of this would be as far as prophecy and the end of the age. And since this is a podcast where I do talk about current events, things that are happening in the world, things that are happening in the news from that spiritual or spiritualist perspective, I thought these were valid questions. What is happening? Is it going to get better? Is it going to get worse? We spoke last week on the show about how spiritualists view the Bible, that it is a book of prophecy. But when you talk to a lot of spiritualists, you'll find that, opinions vary. Some will say that the prophecies spoken of in the Bible are going to come to pass. There will be an end of the age or an end of this particular system that we live in. And others say that no, the earth will never end. Man will go on forever. And even that the second coming or the return of Jesus, as talked about in the Bible, may have already happened, but it was a spiritual return as he took up residence in our hearts or among us to be our teacher, our guide. So I suppose there are just as many speculations and ideas about the end of days and spiritualism as there is in any other Christian denomination in mainstream Christianity. There are many different beliefs, many different theories and thoughts about what's going to happen or not going to happen. Some people believe that the book of Revelation already happened with the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. So opinions certainly vary. I happen to be one of those people who, looking at the Bible as a book of prophecy, feel that some of these prophecies have a past fulfillment, but they will also have a future fulfillment. Doesn't it say somewhere in the Bible, in Proverbs or Ecclesiastes, that that which has been will be again, or something of that nature? And we have the old saying, history loves to repeat, and mankind certainly, most if not all spiritualists will agree that we're here on planet Earth to learn, to evolve our souls, to become better people, to prepare for the afterlife. And so if there are lessons that we don't learn here on planet Earth as individuals, as a collective group, as a species, we will be doomed to repeat those mistakes until we learn a better and higher way. And so we certainly know that man, when it comes to governing himself, or the systems man constructs around society and government, they've always been full of flaws and power grabbing and greed and gain. The elitists have always looked to run the show, to possess all of the resources and the money. And we haven't come so very far from those empires and elitists of the past trying to rule the world, own all the resources, be in possession of all the wealth. There's still much we have yet to learn, and mankind is still making war over land, over resources. It really is a sad commentary when you look at the history of man, and it seems that we, throughout time, even here in 2022, when we're supposed to be so much more educated and technologically advanced, that we're repeating a lot of the same mistakes of the past. So is it any wonder that there may be harder lessons to learn because we haven't learned them from our ancestors? We haven't changed the trajectory of our path as a species. So I believe personally, again, that some of these prophecies may have had a past fulfillment and that they will be mirrored or have a greater fulfillment in the future. And there are biblical scholars who teach and believe that as well. As one who once upon a time, and I still am very much a student of the prophecies of the Bible. When I was in evangelical Christianity, that was one of the main subjects I was very interested in. And when you study prophecy and then you observe the world around you, what's happening in the news, how people are acting, and you see those words from the prophecies of the Bible playing out on the world stage, it isn't such a far leap, nor do I think it is an illogical leap to say these things are going to have a future fulfillment, and it's only a matter of time. I also believe, as the early Christians believe, that prophecy is conditional, meaning that if we start heading in the in the wrong direction, and we, as the Old Testament calls out many times, if we repent and turn away from our wicked ways and we seek the ways of God, God will forgive us and heal our land. So it really is up to us and our actions and where we go from here, whether, as I always say, we drive the bus over the edge of the cliff, or whether we put on the brakes and save ourselves a whole lot of heartache in the future. And this is something that spiritualists believe as well, that God has not set up a prophetic calendar as many evangelicals teach, in which he is going to punish man or pour out his wrath upon planet Earth, but rather prophecy is conditional in our own lives and collectively. So depending on what we do, the laws of the universe will either fall in on us like a house of cards, or we will change our ways and God will have mercy on us and heal us and guide us to a better way. So that question being asked, do I think what's happening right now is the beginning of the end of the age is upon us? My answer to that would be, it very well could be. You know, we're seeing a lot of people right now, myself included, looking at the state of the world right now, looking at the state of mind that many people are in. We don't even have a shared sense of reality anymore. We're ready to turn on one another and hurt one another and kill one another for political differences, for racial differences, for religious differences. Violence is at an all-time high. Gun violence here in America is, so far in 2022, we've had more gun violence episodes than there are days in the year. So a lot of people are saying they've never seen anything like this before in their lives or even in history, where So many people were unhinged. So many people were depressed. Depression is at an all-time high. Violence, everything just seems to be teetering, on that ledge. And one false move, and everything we know is going to collapse down around our ears. So this definitely could be the end of the age. And when you talk about these kind of things now, a lot of people, as the Bible predicts, will scoff. Oh, your Santa Claus in the sky, your fairy godmother in the sky is going to bring an end to everything and answer prayers, and ha ha ha. Even religious people are turning away from the notion of prophecy and saying, well, it's already all been fulfilled. None of this is going to happen. That's ridiculous. We have a lot of people who are religious that I've talked about in many podcasts that, say and do terrible things. And yet they'll turn around and say, well, those prophecies don't apply to me because, I'm born again. I said the magic prayer to receive Jesus into my life. So therefore, no matter what I do, I'm forgiven because Jesus paid it all. And that's why I steal the old phrase from the evangelicals back in the day when they said, you profess heaven, but you live like hell. And a lot of people certainly do that these days. So, yeah, there's a lot going on in society. There's a lot going on with the weather and natural disasters. I would even put in that the rise in the UFO phenomenon. These things are everywhere. Even the government's getting involved and finally admitting, something's out there. We don't know what it is. I just saw on the news this morning that this fall, I believe it's Congress. They're putting together a group of people to really look into this UFO phenomenon, what we know about them, what we don't know about them. Scientists are now taking it seriously. Quantum physicists saying we don't know what these things are. Are they from the future? Are they from some other, time, space dimension? The maneuvers that they do are just far beyond anything that we have. And, the G-forces and the turns that these things make, that they would just crush a human being if someone was inside. So, signs in the heavens and signs in the earth, people not knowing, what the heck is going on, what's going on in our world, what's going on in our skies, what's going on with society. There are anomalies in space that we seem to pick up, every other day. So definitely those signs in the heavens and the earth and the sun and the moon and the stars really ramping up. And I don't take that lightly when I think of prophetic events. Because as I said in the beginning of this show, all you have to do is read the prophecies, study the prophecies, look out your window, turn on the TV, read the headlines, and they seem to be playing out right before our eyes. Not to mention the words of Jesus when he said in the last days, there will be wars and rumors of wars and earthquakes in diverse places. He said, as it was in the days of Noah, so shall it be before the coming of the Son of Man. People were eating and drinking and being given away in marriage, until the flood came and swept them all away. And with all this happening in the world, a lot of people just seem to ignore it. Political leaders still want to go to war. They still want to create chaos, make it hard for the average man and woman to make a living, to buy gas, to buy food. They always capitalize, on a good crisis to their advantage. People are just glued to their cell phones and their social media and their selfies and look at me, I want to be a Kardashian and all this crazy stuff. People just seem to ignore what's happening around them like it's every day. It's just an everyday occurrence, and it reminds me of that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio on Netflix that came out last January, Don't Look Up. I think a giant 1,000-mile long UFO could descend over the earth ready to blow us all to smithereens, and people will just go about their business going, this has probably happened before. Nothing's going to happen. We're fine. Let's just continue to go to war and fight and money grab and, power grab and go on our social media and take pictures of ourselves doing the duck lips and making peace signs with the giant UFO over our heads. We're just so disconnected from reality and the ramifications of what could happen and what is happening. And that's something that, to me, I've said years ago when it comes to the idea of prophecy, and all my evangelical friends used to get very upset with me and the pastors because I would say, as one who studies prophecy, when all this comes to pass, it may come to pass in a way that we don't recognize. We think in our theology, we have it all mapped out. This is going to happen, A, B, C, D, in this kind of chronological order. But what if it doesn't happen that way? What if there are things that happen that aren't in our script of the end of the age? Might we panic? Might we lose faith? Might we say something that is actually from God is from the devil? Might we start running in circles? And people didn't want to hear that. And the funny thing is, back in the late 80s and even through the 90s, before there was an internet, before there was, any podcastings and YouTubes, I used to tell a lot of my evangelical friends and pastors to say, I have a notion that it's very possible that the whole UFO phenomenon is really going to start blowing up and may blow up even bigger as we reach that end of the age, and people aren't going to know what to do with it. They're not going to know if it's from heaven, from hell, or who or what it is. And folks, here we are. Here we are seeing that very thing starting to happen amidst everything else that's unfolding in our world around us. And I've always made the hypothesis that I think the UFO phenomenon is not from other planets, although it could be. I don't discount that. I could be wrong, but I think that the UFOs are the angels and perhaps what we call the fallen angels of old. That it all ties in, the chariots of God, as some would call them. I know in 1979, when I was, 12 years old, and I had my personal angel encounter, and it was something that reoccurred in my life at certain times over the years, and it was always accompanied with what we would call UFO phenomenon, lights in the sky, saucer-shaped craft, and that's what really made a mark on my thinking to say later on in life, I think possibly all this is connected. Now, some people might hear that and go, oh, angels and UFOs, oh, you were probably entertaining a demon. Well, I don't really think so, since it always talked to me, or, she always talked to me about God, about Jesus, about loving others. And at one time later in life, this was about 2003, when the last manifestation of this happened in my life. Will there be future ones? I don't know. That remains to be seen. But around 2003, I was pretty much very disenchanted with religion, very disenchanted with the evangelical community. And, I was just ready to give it all up. And this being, this angel was there to say, don't throw it all away. Don't throw it all away. You need to come back home to God. You need to come back home to Jesus. So would a demon do that? No, I don't think so. So I think all of this is definitely connected. And I think there may be more things that will transpire in the future that maybe I think people will be very confused about. Is this revelation? Is this something else? What's happening? And I think that's why some religious people ignore some of these signs or things that are happening around us because it doesn't fit in with their narrative, so they just choose to ignore it or label it as demonic or deceptive and ignore it. So I think we really have to keep our eyes open as to how a lot of this might unfold. When it comes to the gas shortages, or the gas prices rising and the food shortages and the wars, we see this all throughout the Bible, the wars and the rumors of wars. The book of Revelation talking about, a day's wages for, I think a bushel of wheat or some such thing. So we're definitely starting to see that, come into play. And at the rate we're going, if we don't hit the brakes, this could take us over the cliff. This could take us, into some really bad times. And some experts say it's going to get better. Some say it's going to get worse. And I guess the only thing we can really do is, prepare and wait. Because, we never want to be one of those people that's screaming from the rooftops or the mountaintops, the end is near, the end is coming, and it's not, and it doesn't, because nobody knows when the end is near. But now, what exactly is the end? The Bible, many translations mistranslate the word end of the age to end of the world, and that is incorrect. It is end of the age, and it is more really descriptive, the end of the age of man's corrupt rule. Of course, there's no more death, there's no more sickness, there's no more hatred, but the little system that we've put together with all of its corruption will certainly be ushered out and brought something in that is much better under the rule of God. And, spiritualists talk about this. I've even heard people back in the day in the New Age talk about this. There's going to come a time of cataclysm. Everything is going to be shaken, as this system that we have built, that man has built, is going to start collapsing. And that's going to be a time of great fear and great suffering for a lot of people. Their money isn't going to be able to bail them out anymore. It doesn't matter how many high-profile lawyers and businessmen and CEOs or government officials none of it's going to help. Hence the allegory in the Bible, that they will cast their gold and silver into the streets because it will be worthless. None of those things will make a difference. So it's going to be a time of great suffering for some people that hold on to the ways of this world and want it to last. But for those who know what's happening, it's going to be a time of happiness, joy, rejoicing. Jesus even said, in the Gospels, when we see these things starting to happen, look up, rejoice, your redemption draws nigh. pretty much saying the mess you're living in right now is about to be cleaned up. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. For those who know what's happening, for those who feel like a stranger in a strange land in this crazy, corrupt, elitist system that we live in, it's going to be a wonderful time. And some people even speak of the rapture, and now that's something that's, scoffed at and laughed at. Ha ha ha, the rapture, how silly. But again, it's something I don't discount. You have to think about it, with Sodom and Gomorrah before the storm of brimstone came. The righteous were brought out. Before the flood, the righteous were taken into the ark. In a time of great unrighteousness, Enoch was translated. Elijah was taken up in the chariot of fire, which spiritualists say wasn't a literal chariot, but, the angels of light as they, carried him into the presence of God. He was translated, transformed. And so this notion throughout the stories and the prophecies and the allegories of the Bible certainly always seem to show the people who follow God, or, the righteous people, the godly people, are taken out or away before that judgment comes, or before things really start to crumble. We also see another picture in the Bible as things are starting to crumble. The righteous people aren't afraid. They're actually acting as prophets and messengers, and they're going out and they're preaching and they're telling people, repent, don't be afraid, turn to God. And that's something else that, you see spiritualists and a lot of different other people talking about, that when that time comes, those who walk with God will be going out and helping others who are so attached to this world to release their greed, release their hatred, release the things of this age, this system, and turn to God and find true joy, happiness, and contentment. So really, when these things start to happen, and again, I could be wrong, but I think it depends where we're at spiritually at the time. If we have no faith, or if we have a very superficial faith, where we hang on to the things of this world too tightly, it's going to be a hard time when this particular age, this particular system that we live in starts to crumble and fade away, when it's in its death throes. It's going to be a time of great anxiety and even horror for some of those people. I could only imagine how the elitists are going to feel during that time, because all their trust, all their faith is in themselves, their riches, their possessions, the resources they have acquired. Exxon might be making record profits, in the billions and trillions right now during this rising gas crisis. And I heard, they're not even drilling for oil to replenish, because they're just setting back, basking in all this money. I can only imagine what those people are going to go through when all of that starts to fail them, when all of that starts to be taken away, because it's not a part of God's new universe, God's new earth, as everything becomes more spiritualized. And so really that's my take on it. I don't say be afraid. I'm not with a lot of these preppers. Oh, you better have guns, you better have food, you better have this, you better have that. Trust me, it doesn't matter how many guns you have. It doesn't matter if you own your own personal fleet of armored tanks. It doesn't matter if you have 20 years worth of food stored up somewhere in an underground bunker somewhere. it's not going to matter. There are going to be disasters that are going to sweep all that away. There are going to be people, and trust me, when things get bad enough, the government knows where these people are. The government knows that the preppers are out there. You don't think that they're not going to go after their resources and their guns? And do you really think that a handful of preppers, armed with, whatever firearms they might have, are going to stand a chance against the United States Army that's probably going to be coming in and confiscating their land and their goods and their weapons? It's a fool's paradise to think that that's the way out. And I'm not saying don't prep. Of course, have some extra food. Things get bad. You want to be able to survive as comfortably as you can and take care of your family during those times. But putting all of our faith in, YouTube preppers or internet preppers telling us what we need to do to survive, the coming, cataclysm, I just don't think those things are really going to save anybody in the end. Maybe for a period of time, they'll get by better than some others. But in the end, it's a fortress made of glass. It's going to be breached. It's not going to sustain them, where they're going to come out of their bunkers in the end and start rebuilding the earth. I just feel in my heart that's not what's going to happen. So I say trust in God. Have faith in God. Prepare the best that you can, according to your means. But have faith in God. Don't fear what's coming. Remember, Jesus said, these things must come to pass. Don't let your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Jesus said when we see these things starting to happen, we shouldn't be in terror. We should look up. We should rejoice. Our redemption draws near. Things are going to get better. It's funny, when I spoke last week about the spiritual experiences I had when I was just a little kid, the spirit manifestations that were in my life and that they were very positive. And the funny thing is, by the time I was probably, honestly, I want to say between 8 and 10 years old. And again, I didn't know anything about religion. I didn't know anything about the Bible. I didn't know anything about prophecy. But I had my own intuition as I looked at the world around me. It's a little kid, 8, 9 years old, 10 years old. And I had this thought for years. Number one, all of this, and nobody told me about these kinds of things, end of the age. But I always looked around me and thought to myself, all of this isn't going to last forever. Eventually, all of this is going to come to an end. And there's 3 things that will happen when we know it's coming to its end. Number 1, the weather is going to get extremely hot. It's going to get much hotter before those days of the end come upon us. And here I am now, 55 years old, seeing this, global warming or whatever is happening out there. Some of the summers are just brutal. I mean, right now, as of June 11th, 2022, in the United States, down in the southern states, they're having record high temperatures over 100 degrees. The ice caps are melting. So we're definitely seeing things getting hotter. So here I was, 8, 9, 10 years old, and this is something that came into my mind since then. I just knew the weather's going to get hotter. Number 2, we're going to see man really start to overbuild. Everything's going to start to become overcrowded. Where there were once fields, there's going to be buildings on top of buildings. And now you look at the world. Where I used to live, where I grew up, was a little country town. If you go there now and flip a coin, that coin will land in a parking lot, no matter where you stand. And it used to be just trees and fields and woods, and now it looks like a dirty dump of a slum city. And it's sad to see. I saw it. I don't live there anymore, but I visited a couple of years ago, and just before COVID, and it was a real mess. So people will overbuild. Man will start to crowd himself out. And number three, everything will start to get very dirty. No matter where you look, it's not going to look nice and pretty and picturesque anymore. Everything's going to look dingy and dirty and overcrowded and polluted. Now that's certainly happening as well. And I also had the sense beyond those three, people would become more desperate, more angry, more anxious. And that's certainly happening. So those little spirit impressions that came to me when I was just a kid are starting to unfold, and I remember those things. And I notice those things, and I don't take them for granted, that I had those thoughts since I was around 8 years old and onward, and here they are happening in my lifetime. But again, it's not something I'm afraid of. I trust in God. He's taken care of me all this time in my life. And I trust that He always will, no matter what happens, whether I live or whether I die. God's got my back, and I'm okay with that. I've had a saying for many years, probably 25, 30 years now, I've had a saying, this is man's world, and he will run it into the ground. And he certainly is. And when I say this is man's world, I don't mean he owns the earth like the elitists think, the masters of the universe, the elitists, the owners of the earth. No, this is man's world because of the system he has built, the prison system he has built that we're all living in. The earth belongs to God, the beauty of nature. I mean, you think about it, you go out to the mountains or the woods, and it's so peaceful. We feel so connected to God and to spirit when we're out in nature. It takes man's consciousness, man's actions coming onto the scene that makes things dirty and polluted and hectic and war-torn and anxiety-riddled. If man weren't here, Earth would just be that quiet, peaceful place. The animals doing what animals do. There'd be no war, there'd be no bombs, there'd be no polluted streams. So it's all up to us what we do individually and collectively. And this is man's world right now, and he will run it into the ground. But we don't have to be a part of man's world or man's system. Yes, we exist in it for a short period of time, but eventually all this will come to its natural end, and everything will be spiritualized, the new heavens and the new earth. And that is when the people of God will certainly rejoice and enter into a new and better age, one where all of this is no more. So, folks, I hope this answered your question. I kind of went on a little bit of a lecture here, but I just wanted to share my heart and my thoughts when it comes to what's happening with all this right now in our world. Yes, it's uncomfortable. It might get more uncomfortable. Nobody wants to live through, cataclysms and hard times and, whatever might be coming if we don't change our direction. I'm like everybody else. I want to go to the grocery store. I want to buy my almond milk and my rice checks and my Oreo cookies, and go to work Monday through Friday and Go out to dinner on the weekend with my family and come home and sit down and, watch, a good horror movie. You just want to live life. No one likes change. No one likes it when things are disrupted, but it's going to happen. And these are the times we need to say, hey, if it does get worse, what am I going to do? Am I going to panic with everybody else, or am I going to put my faith in God and just enter his rest as the Bible talks about? And I think that's what all of us should be seeking to do right now, because it will bring us peace and much more stability in our own thinking, emotions, and lives. So again, I hope you got something out of this show this week. Until next time, stay in love, stay in the light, and I'll see you next week here on the journey into spiritualism. God bless.